Well, I want to take time to thank everyone for joining us today. For those who are joining us live, as well as anyone who's going to watch us after, watch the recordings after the fact. Thank you for taking time out of your day. Today we're going to be jumping in and we're going to be looking at why structure matters, and really like how can we get better success building guidebooks when we buy into a specific structure. So that's where we're going to be going at, where we're diving in today. What we're looking at in terms of an agenda, and I'm hoping to keep this 30 to 40 minutes. Those are always my goals. I tend to talk too much and they go longer. But we're going to be diving into 4 areas. We're going to look at a big mistake to avoid structurally when building training. After that, we're going to look at really how the structure can help us in the development process. Then jumping into strategy to employ or strategies to employ to make it easier when it comes to building. And then looking at how we can supercharge our development process by buying it or through buying into a structure and sticking to that. So that is where we are, that's where we're going at for today. So jumping right in, let's look at, mistakes, and really to me, we're really looking at one today. One mistake to definitively avoid when building training. So what I see happen many times when people build out training, and I actually blame PowerPoint for this, is that there isn't necessarily a defined structure. It is actually just that they're going through and basically kind of a winding path. I've got a slide, I put another slide, I've put another slide in, here's what we're saying, here's what we're doing as we go through the training. Where when we build training, we really have a specific item that we're trying to achieve, right? It's the goal of the training, right? And when we bring in our learner, right, and I jumped too far, but when we bring in our learner, if we don't have a defined path to it, from getting where they're currently at to where they need to go can be a daunting position. Or look at it from the facilitator's point of view. If they've got a training to lead and they don't have a defined roadmap on how to get there, that can be a daunting process to get from where the learner or the facilitator is to the overall objective, what we're trying to solve by the training that we've built out. So the way we can make this easier is to actually, instead of just saying, here's where we're going and here's where we're starting, give them defined steps to go through. So the way, in learning and development, think of these as our objectives. These are the terminal objectives, the major stepping stones that the learner needs to go through to get from where they're currently at to that goal that's currently out of reach. But as we define objectives, right, the learner is able to start working their way through those objectives and eventually get themselves to the goal of the course, or maybe it's the facilitator, leading the learners through those objectives, getting them towards the goal, where then ultimately everyone's able to find success. So this is, to me, this is one of the biggest mistakes people have, is it's like, we need training, let's start building, instead of stepping back for a moment and saying, all right, here's where we need to get to, right? That's always great. Stephen Covey's second habit of highly successful people, begin with the end in mind, right? Here's what we're trying to solve, or here's where we're trying to get to. We know where we're at, but actually laying out those steps. What are the puzzle pieces that are going to get us to where we need to go? So take a few moments, figure that out. Figure out those objectives. A design document is going to be something that's going to really help you in this process. All right, so second item, and these kind of, they're almost like they're, little steps taking us through the overall thing, right? Amazingly enough how this works. But how does structure help us in this development process? So we already talked about those objectives, right? We've got our goal. we've set up some objectives and how we want to get our learner to it, right? And if we've got terminal objectives, we probably have enabling objectives within each one of those, right? Smaller steps to get us to the larger steps. But let's look at this in terms of a guidebook, right? Because that's what we're talking about here, how structure can help us build a guidebook. So if we were going to be looking at a guidebook, right? I'm obviously just giving you an image of a guidebook so that you don't have to use as much imagination. But within that guidebook, obviously there's many different pieces, and today we're not getting into all of those. We're really just looking at it in terms of the structure. But if we're opening it up, the guidebook itself basically holds the whole training program, right? This is, to me, when I say a guidebook, a facilitator guide's the ruling document, and everything's in that guidebook, right? We open it up, whoever takes that guidebook off the shelf, and, obviously this is the book I'm reading, but if this was my guidebook, if I was to take this off the shelf, I could open it up and have everything I successfully need to run the program. Or if your main facilitator's out and someone else is picking it up, inside that guidebook is my entire program. So whoever needs it can do it, and I have consistency across multiple facilitators, multiple locations, all of those things. But inside that what is the training program? It's actually a series of steps where terminology that we use, we call them modules, right? Think of this as you're writing an outline. You're back in high school, you're in high school history or high school English, and you got to write an essay, and one of the first things they had you do was create your outline. Same concept. So our objectives of those goals that the objectives of the goal we're trying to get to become our modules, right? So those are my Roman numerals within my outline. But within my modules, those break out into smaller steps or lessons, enabling objectives, another term. Other way to look at a module could also be a topic, a lesson could be a subtopic. Whatever terminology you use, but we're looking at a hierarchical structure, right? So within our modules, every module is going to be built up of lessons. And this is a point, especially when you're using LeaderGuide Pro, a module cannot exist without a lesson, right? So if you have a module, the way you get to that module is through a series of, through a lesson or a series of lessons, right? They're the smaller steps taking us to the bigger step, which is our module or our terminal objective, which is then taking us, those bigger steps take us to the goal. But a module cannot exist without a lesson. And within a lesson, these are going to break out into our different content parts. We call them content parts. Think of these as the says, the do's, the asks, right? So this is, in this example I'm showing you, like I'm giving you within this lesson 1.1, we're spending a certain amount of time, and that's that first row or the first content block, right? And then I'm going to be showing you a slide, and I've got some notes for the facilitator over on the right-hand side of that slide that it's animated and there's sound, and make sure your sound's turned on, right? So that when they're getting prepared to run the course, they can go through, and now when it's time to launch, everything's happening as we want it, right? And then they're saying something, and then we're running an activity. But these are the pieces or the smaller steps within the lesson that is going to take us to the bigger steps, which is our modules, which is going to take us to our further, the larger steps, which, those modules are going to lead us up to our course goal, right? So we're basically starting at the high point, breaking it down into smaller chunks, and then breaking those chunks down into smaller chunks. So the more we can think of it this way, the easier it's going to become to build. All right. So any questions on that so far? I mean, it's not rocket science. It's learning and development. But it's, as much as it's one of those ones in order to lose weight, I need to exercise more, right? I need to, bring in less calories than I burn, all of those type of things. even though we know it, sometimes putting into actions or finding the right moment or finding the time or the way to go about it. So this is why I harp on these things. And harp's probably not the best word, but the more we do this, the more I go through and we talk about these things so that we can dive into these further. All right. So let's look at this third point. Let's talk about, a structural strategy or strategies to employ to make this easier. And as amazingly enough, as I was talking about, hey, losing weight, this one's probably not going to help us, at least in terms of an example. So when I build training, I like to use what I call the burger method. And basically what I'm doing, and I'm going to be mixing food metaphors here, but I'm going to be sandwiching our training material in between two buns. Right? So the way this is, within the burger, right, the meat, the cheese, the bacon, the condiments, all of those things, that's actually the training program. That's the course. These are all those steps we're taking to get to that overall course goal. And we're sandwiching it between an introduction and a conclusion. Another way to look at this is we're going to have a piece where it's the introduction. This is where we're telling them what's going to happen, right? We're laying out the groundworks, expectations. This is where we can, sell them on why this training is important to them so that they're more they have a better chance of engagement because they can see the benefits to them and not necessarily the benefit to the organization, right? And that's a piece that we should probably be keeping track of within our in the guidebooks itself. Again, that's another conversation all told. But the introduction is where we tell them what we're going to go over and during training. We kind of set expectations. Then we enjoy the training, the meat, the bacon, the cheese, all of that stuff. And then we finish it off with a bun as well, our conclusion. And this is where we have our wrap up and our summary, and we kind of go back over the key points and maybe circle back again to why we were doing this training so that it's again fresh in their mind of the benefits to them so that they can start employing it, right? And now our training can hopefully become more effective. And then it's, where we lay out the different pieces, next steps, right? Is there additional work that they need to do? Are they going into another portion of training? All of those things. So I always, and I'll caveat always is my 90% rule, somewhere between 90 to 95%, this is how I build. And that's just acknowledgement. At some point, there's probably a time where, sandwiching those two things, I'm not going to do, but I don't plan for the exception, I plan for the rule. So the way this would look let's say in a larger training, a multiple objective training, I'd have my introduction module with my welcome lesson, right? And so the introduction module is really, we're setting the stage for the training. We're, letting them know why it's beneficial to them, all of those type of things. That's the objective. And that, we're using that welcome lesson in, maybe it's introduction activities and, welcome to the course and kind of going over, why it's important to them. All of those are happening within that welcome lesson. All right. Then we get into, in this case, modules 2 through whatever is the actual meat and bacon and cheese or whatever you like to have in your sandwich or burger. That's why we're doing the training. And then we get into the conclusion module, right? Again, so the objective of that conclusion module is wrapping up the training, reinforcing what we went through, why it's important to them, next steps, those type of things, which all of that's happening in that summary lesson, right? So here is, and if you look at it, is truly an outline. And this actually will then tie into your table of contents within your guidebook. But one of the other things that people will, I hear quite a bit, well, I don't have multiple objectives. I just have a single training program. Well, great. if that's the case, look at this layout. So I will challenge your thought that you're always going to have a module, right? In this case, the module may be the overall course objective, but still have it as a module. And so I'll give you the example. Let's say I was going to do a training on the morph transition in PowerPoint, right? So that's my module, and I'd go have an introduction, right? Telling them why the morph transition's good and introductions and all those type of things. Go through the series of lessons, right? Why we're doing this training, and then wrap up the conclusion portion of it. All right, so this is, again, burger method. But the reason why I say this is definitely, you still want to have a lesson, in my example of the morph transition, that could be a standalone piece of training, right? And actually I did one a couple weeks ago on the morph transition as a standalone piece of training. But I'm acknowledging the fact, by putting this in a module, that this could be a piece of a larger training program, right? There could be a training program on, the Grandmaster training of PowerPoint, right? And in that training, you've got, you're going to learn about morph transition, but you're also learning about animations, and you're learning about the slide masters and the note masters and all these other individual modules that could then later on be put together to build out an entire training program. So when we go with a smaller route, you still, even though you've got an overall course program, you definitively still need to have a module, because it is acknowledging the fact and setting yourself up for future success that you have, this could be a piece of a larger overall program. So what I would recommend, if all you get out of today's session is that burgers are good, I would, that's a good, it's a good thing to keep in mind, right? Because once we've got whichever module, whichever structure we go with, the smaller, single module with a series of lessons, or multi-modules with multiple lessons, either one of those, fit into the burger method. And if we go this burger method, I do promise you that your learners are going to eat it up. They will gladly pay you Tuesday for your training today. So, buy into it. You may have a different structure, and that's fine, but be consistent in that structure and have it as a hierarchical system. My guess is your structure would look the same. Maybe terminology is going to be a little bit different, but be consistent and plan for the everyday. Don't plan for the exception. All right, and then lastly, let's talk about supercharging this, right? How do we make this easier? And for this, we're actually going to be diving further into the LeaderGuide Pro side of this. Again, right now, just looking at it from the structure point of view. All right, so when we go to build out a guidebook, right? And so you're on the LeaderGuide Pro ribbon, and you go and you choose start a new guidebook. You get this dialog box that we're seeing somewhere that way, right? And this is where we get in and we're able to start making choice, name of the program, which is going to show up on our cover page, and you're choosing it as a facilitator, as a participants, and column structure, the collection, all these things that we're choosing out, right? And if we were to build just like this, we get the upfront material, right? So the cover page, acknowledgements page, table of contents, all of those pieces. Now, one of the other items we can do on here is that you can build just a portion of that program, right? We can choose the dialog, the checkbox for content part. So why may we do this? So it could be a couple of reasons. Maybe you have multiple people who are building out, you've broken up your training to be, your multi-module training to be built out by several people. Like I'm doing module 1 and Bob's doing module 2 and Sue Ellen's doing module 3. Each of us could build a content part of our modules and lessons, and then later on stitch all those together with LeaderGuide Pro. Or maybe I'm building that 30-minute lunch and learn that's going to be, at some point, could be a bigger piece of something. I just want to build a module or lesson. You can go that route. So when we choose this content part, and obviously I'm just kind of jumping through the dialog boxes that you're going to see, but you get to a dialog box that's going to prompt you almost immediately, where it's basically asking you, are we building a module and its lessons, or are we just building a lesson? So if we click yes, we're going to get a module page and a lesson page. If we click no, you're just going to get the lesson page. So either, if we choose the module one, you end up with the LeaderGuide Pro module page, where we can start filling in information about that, the objective step, right? So if we went back to my diagram from earlier of all the different objectives that the stickman was jumping up, the module page is capturing information about that objective, right? What's our overall goal, or in this case, not goal of the training program, but goal of this module. So really, what's our objective, our terminal objective? Information about timing and an overview, which is really, this is how we're getting our learner from where they're currently at to that objective, right? Through a series of role plays, hands-on learning events, and knowledge-based articles, the participants will be able to XYZ. List of materials, any resources, references, we're capturing all of this in one place, right? Again, going back to this being a ruling document, if I'm taking my guidebook off the shelf and I need to look into it and be prepared to be prepared to lead the course, every module page is laying out the high level what's happening for that facilitator who's going to be leading the program. And then within, if you create a module page, create a module content part, you get the module and a lesson page. If you just build the lesson, you would just get the lesson page. Now, I actually went and showed you a little bit here versus just showing you the lesson header and then where you'd start putting in your content blocks. But again, these are the individual steps, individual pieces that we're taking the facilitator through, basically from top to bottom. They work their way through this. Facilitating the class is then taking the learners through those, which is then getting them to this, the overall enabling objective of this lesson. And after all those enabling objectives, they should reach the overall objective of this, of the module, which would then allow us to be one more step closer to the course goal. So we can go this route and start building things out. Once we've done that, once we've started building materials, whether we've built out whether we've built out our Grandmaster training of PowerPoint full program, or I've just built out a module content part, let's say on the morph transition in PowerPoint. Either way, on the LeaderGuide Pro ribbon in the modules and lesson control section, they look like 3 books with a little drop-down caret next to it. In here, this is where I can start manipulating modules and lessons within my guidebooks to make my development process easier. So I've got different things that I'm able to do. So let's say the full guidebook of PowerPoint training, I can insert archive modules or lessons. So if I've built out that the morph training module and I want to bring it into my overall training program, my PowerPoint training, I can use the insert feature under librarian and bring that individual content part right into my document. Or let's say I've got my whole training and we decided we're not doing the stuff on Slide Masters and that needs to come out. Instead of having to go through and manually delete all the things, I can choose to delete out that entire module or that lesson. The module and its lessons are just the lesson by choosing that delete function. Or I can reorder my documents, how I want things to go. Again, I'm working at the structural level and moving entire modules up or down or completely rearranging those to get the desired look. And lastly, I can archive out or save out, out of that PowerPoint Masters training, the piece on animations. I want to build, I want to run that separately just as its own little piece. I can pull out that module and all its lessons and have that as a separate item that I can then function. I can work just with that. So the way this would, and just to kind of give you a look of what you would be, like in this case, when we go to insert using this function, we get a dialog box that's asking us where's that piece located? Is it in our library locals? Is it in our master library? Those the two folders that are installed when you first put in LeaderGuide Pro. Or choose other, and you can then put, if it's located somewhere else. And then what's coming in, a module, a lesson, and so on. So you're able to pick and choose, and it just makes that process that much more simple. Or, in the case of reordering, when you've got a guidebook that's built out, what's on this dialog box, what's on the left-hand side, this is what's going on, the way the document's currently laid out. Over on the right-hand side, I can move things over, and now when I click the Run button, it would create a new guidebook. So I still have my original in its original layout, but I have a new one in my rearranged layout. So I can, I can keep what I had in case, maybe I made a mistake or something. I still have my original, but now I have my new reordered one. Or we can get into, in this case, when it comes to archiving, this is showing us all the different modules and lessons that are in my guidebook, and I could go and select whichever one I wanted, and I could save it out. So if I choose a module, it's going to archive the module and any of the lessons underneath them. If I just choose a lesson, it archives or saves out just that lesson. So I've got a whole bunch of different ways just by buying into the structure and maintaining the structure, especially in a LeaderGuide Pro document. I can exponentially save time when I'm building materials, right? You buy into the module and lesson structure. Well, let's say you've built out training and it's, a portion of, let's say you built out a new hire training and there was a portion on the HR systems. Obviously, I'm making this stuff up on the fly. But that piece could go into, new manager training. So instead of having to rebuild it, I could archive it out, save it out of one training, insert it into the other. I'm going to probably have to do a little bit of repurposing because it's got a different audience, so that you got to change up the voice. But I'm not starting from square one, right? I'm 80, 90% down the line, and now I'm able to start, saving more time, but also building in a consistent manner. Because I'm still maintaining that same structure process throughout my document. Where if you kind of have your willy-nilly, technical term, if you're willy-nilly onto the structure in document 1, and now you want to bring it over into document 2, well, document 2 may have a different complete structure. Now what you brought over, it's a disparate, and you've got, things are kind of clashing. So the more we can consistently use a structure, it allows us to replicate it. It allows us to build quicker. Let's jump over. Let me pull this up real quick just so you can see it within a LeaderGuide Pro document. All right, if we, I hopped over here into Word. So in a LeaderGuide Pro document, if we look at the modules section, which is really, this is the training portion, but this serves the role of the in-the-moment reference aid for the facilitator. Say this, do this, show this, right? All those individual content blocks. Each module, each overall objective become the high-level pieces of my table of contents. My lessons, those stepping blocks, become, these are the subsets, and I'm kind of climbing up each one of those to get, once I get through all of these, I would then have met the objective of that module, and now I'm able to move on. And each one of those, as we move through each one of them, we're one step closer to the overall goal that we're trying to achieve with the course. So that's today. Those were the main points I want to talk about structure today. You know, the more we can lean into it, the easier your life's going to be. So let me ask, what questions do you have for me so far, or what do you have for me at this point? All right. Well, I will point. I can't say, "Hey, use the burger method," and then not come back to it. So today, when we went into this, we want to, the four main things we wanted to look at, right? We wanted to stay away, watch out for some mistakes, and the big one was not clearly defining a path to get from where the learner or the facilitator currently is to the overall course goal, right? So coming up with, stay away from that. So come up with a path, which is really laying out objectives, and then using those objectives as the baseline for the structure of our course, right? So that role of structure really is, those are our modules, those are our lessons. And then from that, use that burger method, right? Sandwich, whatever product you want to have that is sandwiched, wedged between two pieces of bread, two buns, two pieces of lettuce, but that really wouldn't be that enjoyable to eat. It's a whole other story. But tell them what we're going to tell them, right? Top bun. Give them the meat of the materials, right? Why we're doing the training program, and then at the bottom have my conclusion. Tell them what we're going to tell them. So intro, meat and potatoes, conclusion, and it works whether you're doing a multi-module one, or if you're just doing a single module. Just make those the intro and the conclusion your first and your last lessons. And then lastly, for supercharging your guidebook development, take advantage of the tools within LeaderGuide Pro that will allow you to use that structure to help you build materials, reorder it, all of those type of things. Take something from one document, put it into the other, or build in different pieces and then stitch them together to build your overall program. So with that, that's what I have. I am always happy to answer any questions, but I will see you guys. I think the next one of these is next or 2 weeks from today, and if I remember correct, I'm doing this off the top of my head. I think we're gonna go over some must-use features within Word. So they'll help in general in LeaderGuide Pro, or developing learning and development in general, but just general Word use. Here's some ones you need to use. But with that, I will give you the rest of your day. Have a wonderful rest of the week. All right, take care, folks.